Today's video is a perfect example of upcycling a cheap thrift store item, 15 bucks, and turning it into a $250 stained glass window. My original thought was to create a stained glass panel and put it behind this metal frame. But the way that this thing is constructed, it makes it very difficult to mount a stained glass panel on the back. My new plan is to remove this metal and then cut a rabbet all the way around.
Listen, Doc. Now don't spread this around. I am a rabbit!
And then lay my stained glass inside. This project is a great way to use up a lot of my scrap glass. I'm not going to need to purchase any glass at all for this project. Today's stained glass project is an intermediate skill level that combines woodworking with stained glass. Now for me, the creative juices really begin to flow when I start to combine different materials like glass and wood into one project. Now if you're new to stained glass, I do have some beginner videos you can watch. Links in the video description. Now I'm going to head out to the garage and cut that rabbet.
What do you mean, rabbit?
No offense, Bugs. My stained glass pattern is now finished. I actually have 113 individual pieces that I'm going to have to cut to make up this stained glass panel. But this is the exact size that I need. In fact, I even cut out a duplicate out of cardboard. This way when I cut the pieces of glass, I can lay them on the cardboard and I can be sure that my end result is the exact size that I need. Now when you're cutting out the pattern, you don't want to use regular scissors. You use what's called copper foiling shears. The technique that I'm using is called copper foiling. What that means is that I take a piece of copper foil tape and I wrap it around the edge of every single piece. And when they butt together, that takes up a little bit of space, which is why you have to use copper foiling shears when you're cutting out the pattern, because this actually removes a thin strip of paper between every piece that I cut.
Brilliant! I have absolutely no idea what's going on.
I now have all 113 pattern pieces cut and glued to 113 pieces of glass. It took me about 5 or 6 hours to get to this point. The problem though is that when you're cutting the glass, it's almost impossible to cut it the exact size of your pattern piece. There's often a little bit of overhang or sharp edges, and I need to grind every piece of glass down, every single edge, so I end up with a piece of glass that's the exact size of the pattern piece. I have all all of my pieces cut out. I ground down the edges. So now's the time to examine all of your glass. When I push these pieces together, it should now be smaller than the cardboard pattern it's sitting on. Because if you remember, when I used those shears, I cut out the pattern with a small gap in between. So now these pieces are actually smaller than the pattern. You can also tell how good of a job you did when you look at the glass. There shouldn't be any gaps in between. Now if there are, this is the time to fix it. I now have all of my glass pieces copper foil taped and ready to go. This thing can now be soldered together. When it comes to solder, there are many different types, but there's two distinct differences. This is a flux core solder. This is a solid core solder. You don't want to use a flux core. I have used this stuff before in the past, and it leaves a splatter all over the glass, which is difficult to clean. It's really made for contact soldering. We want to use a solid core, which means that you have to apply your own flux. So I brush this on all of the copper foil and then I solder, and you end up with a much stronger and cleaner bead of solder. It does give off a certain amount of smoke, and I don't have any ventilation in here, so I'm going to set up outside to do all of my soldering. And if I drop this along the way, you just might see a grown man cry. After brushing on a thin layer of flux, I begin soldering by placing a bead of solder on all the intersecting points on one side of the panel. This keeps everything in place so there won't be any shifting. Now I can make a continuous line of solder. This does take a little practice to get good at. When side one is finished, I'll carefully flip it over and solder the other side. Now the big test. If I cut everything correctly, the panel should fit inside of my rabbit. If it's too big, I can grind it down in some spots. If it's too small, well, then you really messed up. This is a black patina for solder. It's a chemical that turns the silver solder black. I brought the window to Beyond Grandma's House antique store to see if it would sell. Well, within 2 weeks, so this is available from Amazon. It comes with everything that you need except for the glass. And 2 crazy kids.
Crazy clown on the table.
Am I supposed to use that in the video?
Use what?